Good morning, welcome to the JeepSolid garage. So today we've got a little surprise. We're going to be working on a new XJ. We've got the proud owner, David, right there, my son-in-law. So this is a 1996 XJ, right?
Yep.
So when did you get, how long have you had it?
I've had it for maybe 2 years.
2 years, and it needs a new clutch, or the clutch is giving you issues?
It's just not engaging very well, and disengaging very, it's not very smooth.
He also might be having issues with the master cylinder, slave cylinder. We're gonna be replacing that as well. And this video is sponsored by South Bend Clutch. They gave us a new kit to install in this XJ. I'm excited to work on it and excited to be working with David. So this will be a fun project. What do we got inside? So there is the new pressure plate. Comes with a throw-out bearing or release bearing. Here's our alignment tool, new pilot bearing on there, and the new clutch disc. So all of this is available on South Bend Clutch. Their website will be linked in the description below. First step, we're gonna chock the wheels, and then next we're gonna disconnect the battery. This is super nice because I got a helper to do everything. And we want the battery disconnected because we're gonna have some jack stands under there. We don't want to short something and have the Jeep lurch forward or move on us. So doing that is important, as well as chocking the wheels. Next, we're gonna disconnect the shift lever from the inside of the cab to get that out of the transmission. So if you can, you want to disengage your shift lever here. But getting to the, there's another boot down under here, which is a real pain to get to. So I'm gonna try to do it from the bottom. We might have to come back and revisit this, but you can disengage it from underneath. We're gonna give that a try. So we are gonna move on to removing the drive shaft. We're gonna take the strap bolts off, the U-joint there. What we're gonna do, we're actually gonna mark, because I want to get the drive shaft back in the same exact spot to keep the balance. So I picked a nice Desert Sun fingernail polish here. This is my daughter's. We're gonna mark this real quick. So that'll do. Now when we pull the U-joint out here, these caps on the end, they'll actually try to come off. There's a bunch of needle bearings inside. So we don't want these caps to come off, so we're actually gonna use a little bit of tape and put some tape around the end here to keep all of that together. So next we're gonna drain the transfer case. We're starting out by making sure we can get the fill plug out first, just to make sure we don't have any issues, then we'll go ahead and drain it. And remember, this is aluminum, so don't over tighten it, because you can strip it out fairly easy. Bloop, bloop, bloop. So there we go, rear drive shaft is out of the transfer case, and we didn't have to drain the fluid, but it's a good time to do these fluid changes. So next, let's move on to the front drive shaft out of the transfer case. David's using his fingernail polish. How often do you use fingernail polish, David?
Never.
Never? You can't say that anymore now. And to make some of those strap bolts easier to get to, we've jacked up one wheel so that we can turn the drive shaft. So that'll make it easier to get to all those bolts. Put on the show. Hey Tootsie. So next we're going to remove the cross member, and to do that we got to get that bolts out of the transmission mount. There's 4 bolts right up in there, 1/2 inch. So now before we disconnect the cross member here, we gotta support the transmission and transfer case with a jack stand, because this is carrying the weight of those things. So let's get a jack stand under there. So now that we've got the transmission mount bolts out, I'm gonna lift up the transmission a little bit off that cross member, just so I know that the weight is off of it. Oh, that's as high as my jack goes. And once we get the weight off of the cross member here, we'll get some jack stands underneath the transmission and transfer case to hold the weight. Then we can remove the cross member. Well, the cross member is off, but what happened?
The bolt head broke off.
We broke the bolt, so we'll be doing a bolt extraction on the cross member over there. So next we're going to move on to removing the exhaust. David's going to hit some of those bolts with penetrating oil, and we'll get that off. So there's the exhaust manifold bolts and the O2 sensor right here. Coming off easy, huh?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a first. David's removing the other O2 sensor. And this one up here, we actually just ended up disconnecting it. That was a lot easier than taking it out. And you don't have to cut your exhaust up, but David's going to be replacing his. So we decided to just cut that, make it a little easier on ourselves. Now we're going to remove the starter.
That's it.
There we go. Now we'll just set this out of the way. Next, we're going to remove the clutch master cylinder and the slave cylinder right here on the back of the transmission. So the bottom nut came off the master cylinder there. Now the top one you have to do from the cab up under the firewall. So there's a little pin to move off of the remove off the push rod, and then the one nut. Now we can start removing all the little pieces off the transmission. Up on top of the bell housing there is the crank position sensor, 2 little bolts to get that guy off. And then we'll start disconnecting the shift linkage. Some of these will just push right out to disengage the linkage here to get that off the transmission. And then up on top of the transmission, so we've got a sensor there to disconnect, the vent hose, the speed sensor on the back of the transfer case. Once we have all these things disconnected, we can drop it down just a couple inches and try to get that shift lever on top. Yeah, just hit those little areas of shift linkage, little WD-40 so we can pull them out easier. The best part of this job, David's under there doing all the work. I had coffee and a donut. You got that shift linkage off?
Get there.
Almost. Let me know when you're done. And one sensor on the passenger side. I think that's the reverse sensor. All right, we've got the transmission safely supported with our transmission jack. These are super useful in a situation like this. You obviously strap it on here, everything's disconnected except the shift lever. So I've dropped this down a couple inches to try to give us a little room to reach up on top of the transmission. And there's a little plate in there, you push it down and twist it, and then the shift lever on top will pull right out. So we're going to try it this way. If not, we're going to have to do it from the cab, so we'll give it a shot. So right in the center of the screen there, there's a rubber boot. We're going to pull that up. Now that little retaining ring will pop off of there. And there it is. It actually worked. I was skeptical, but there's a little spring under there. You can see how you just push that down and then twist it counterclockwise. And now that shift lever will be free. So David's pulling on the shift lever, so it's disengaged. That went so much easier than I was prepared for. I was prepared for that to be a battle. So now we can start disconnecting the transmission from the engine. So now we can start taking the bolts out between the bell housing on the transmission here and the engine. And there's a couple of screws on the front side. On the top, we'll talk about it. I think there's some E12s, which we will have to remove as well. Before we remove all that, we're going to support the engine. We're going to put a jack stand under here with a block of wood to just kind of help support some of the weight to the back of the engine. And we can take all these bolts off. So we're going to go around and take all the other bolts out. We're going to leave these bottom two, one on each side, for the very last. But we're going to get all the others out. So with a long extension and that T12 bit on there, we can get up to the back of the transmission to get that E12. So those are those two top bolts, E12, on the very top of the transmission, one on each side. Big pain. You got it?
Got it.
One bolt. Big pain, huh? All right, the last 2 bolts and the transmission will be free. We're just making sure the shift lever is out. We're gonna bungee cord that up out of the way. All right. And just watch your fingers, like don't get them pinched inside of the scissor jack here. And as we're shimmying it, trying to get it loose, just kind of watching this gap right here. You can see how it's starting to, the transmission's starting to come away from the engine right up there. Keep at it. All right, there we go. Transmission's out. Good job. So, removing the transmission on a 1996 Cherokee XJ. A little bit of a bear.
Well, we got it.
We got it. So, check out the next video where I install the clutch on that. That'll be coming to you guys real soon. Thank you guys and have a good day.